There is an antelope standing at the edge of a river in East Africa, and she is about to make a mistake that should kill her. Not a small mistake, not the kind of mistake that costs you a scraped knee or a close call that you laugh about later. The kind of mistake that, in the world this antelope lives in, ends everything. The kind of mistake that the river has been waiting for patiently in the way that rivers always wait because rivers do not need to hurry. The water goes where it goes, the crocodiles lie still, and the animals that need to cross always eventually come to the edge. She is an impala, specifically one of the most abundant and most hunted antelope species on the continent, and if you have spent any time watching wildlife documentaries, you have seen her kind before. Slender legs, reddish-brown coat, the distinctive black stripes running down the hindquarters that make the running animal look almost striped when the herd moves together. She weighs somewhere around 50 kilograms, which is substantial for a prey animal and completely irrelevant against anything wading in that water. She is fast, genuinely fast, capable of reaching 70 kilometers per hour and of leaping distances of up to 10 meters in a single bound, and none of that speed matters once the water closes over her, because in the water she is in someone else's world entirely. She does not know what is about to happen to her, and then it does. Subscribe right now if you want to understand what survival actually looks like. Not the clean version, not the version where the hero wins because the story requires it, but the real version, the brutal and astonishing version where an animal faces the thing that should end her and somehow incomprehensibly it does not, and then faces it again, and somehow incomprehensibly it does not again. That story is what we are here for. Let's go. To understand what happened to this impala on this particular day, you need to understand the place where it happened, because the place is not incidental to the story. The place is the story. The Masai Mara in southwestern Kenya, bleeding south across a border that means nothing to any animal that lives there into what becomes the Serengeti in Tanzania, is one of those landscapes that the word extraordinary genuinely does not do justice to, because extraordinary implies that the scale of the thing is surprising. And by now, given how many documentaries and photographs have put the Mara in front of the world's eyes, you might think you know it. You might think you have processed it. You have not. Nobody who has not stood in it has processed it. The Mara is a grassland ecosystem of roughly 1,500 square kilometers in Kenya alone, extending to a total Mara Serengeti ecosystem of something closer to 40,000 square kilometers, and it genuinely functions like a clock, not a simple clock. A clock of 100 interlocking mechanisms, each one dependent on all the others, built over millions of years of coevolution between the land and the rain and the grass and the animals and the predators and the insects and the birds and the soil bacteria. All of it ticking and ticking and ticking in a rhythm that is so vast and so old that individual events within it, including the near death of one impala on one morning, seem tiny, until you are that impala. Until you are watching that impala, and then the scale collapses down to a single point, and that single point is everything. The Mara River itself is the axis around which all of this turns, particularly during what has become one of the most watched wildlife spectacles on Earth, the Great Migration Crossing. Somewhere between 1 and 2 million wildebeest, accompanied by hundreds of thousands of zebra and gazelle and eland and yes, impala, make an annual clockwise circuit through the Serengeti and the Mara, following the rains, following the grass, following the particular chemical signals in the air, and the light that evolution has spent millions of years calibrating into their nervous systems. They know in the way that does not require consciousness or intention where the new grass will be. They go there. They eat it, and eventually the circuit brings them to the Mara River, which they must cross, and the crossing is where the river cashes in its patience. The Nile crocodile, Crocodilus niloticus, has been waiting for this moment since the Cretaceous period. That is not hyperbole. The lineage of the Nile crocodile extends back over 200 million years, and the Nile crocodile as a species has been in something close to its current form for something approaching 5 million years, which means it was hunting at river crossings in roughly the way it hunts now before our genus existed. Before our species existed, before our civilization existed, before everything we would recognize as human history existed by a margin that makes human history look like an afterthought. The crocodile is not a primitive animal in the sense of being simple or unsophisticated. It is a refined animal. It has been refined by exactly these river crossings for millions of years. Every feature of its body and behavior is an optimization for exactly this situation. The panicking animal in the water, the narrow window, the particular mechanics of a lunge and a roll. An adult male Nile crocodile in the Mara can reach 5 meters in length and weigh over 500 kilograms. The bite force of a large Nile crocodile is somewhere in the range of 5,000 pounds per square inch, which is the highest bite force measured in any living animal. The jaw muscles that close those jaws are among the most powerful muscles in the animal kingdom. The muscles that open those jaws, interestingly, are comparatively weak. which is why a human being can hold a crocodile's jaws shut with their bare hands, at least in the abstract, at least if the crocodile is not moving or twisting, which a crocodile in water with prey between its jaws always is. The skin, the famous armor-plated skin with its osteoderms, the bony deposits embedded directly in the scales, can resist the impact of another crocodile's bite or a wildebeest's kick. The eyes sit on top of the skull so the animal can see while almost completely submerged. The nostrils seal shut underwater. The heart can redirect blood flow so dramatically during a dive that the crocodile can remain submerged and motionless for up to 2 hours. And the crocodile is cold. Not temperature cold, though that is relevant too since it is ectothermic and needs the sun to warm its body, but behaviorally cold. Temperamentally cold. It does not rush. It has learned in the same way that the species has learned over millions of years that rushing is expensive and waiting is free. Crocodiles at migration crossings sometimes lie motionless at the bottom of the river for hours, positioned in the routes they know the animals will use, waiting for the moment when a body comes close enough that the lunge can be completed in a fraction of a second. They have been observed to fast for months between major feeding opportunities and simply wait. So that is what is in the water. That is what is on one side of the calculation. On the other side is the impala, and the impala's situation on the morning in question is complicated in ways that matter to the story. It is a river crossing day. The pressure of the herd has been building for hours, the way it always builds, wildebeest and zebra and mixed antelope pressing to the bank, testing it, retreating, pressing again, the collective nervous system of 1,000 animals trying to resolve the fundamental conflict between the danger that is obvious, which is the water and whatever is in it, and the danger that is diffuse, which is the depleted grass behind them and the unknown territory ahead. The noise of a crossing builds over time, the grunts and snorts and splashing of the animals at the edge, the bellowing of wildebeest that sounds almost bovine but is somehow wilder than any domestic animal sound, the dust and the movement and the particular collective panic that is a migration crossing in its first minutes. The impala is at the edge, and then she is in the water. What happens in the next few seconds is the first miracle of this story. And I use the word miracle not in the supernatural sense, but in the sense of something whose probability is low enough that it requires a specific account, not just a statistical acknowledgement. The crocodile hits her from the side. It is a large crocodile, not the largest in the river but large, the kind of animal that routinely takes wildebeest that outweigh our impala by 2 or 3 times. The strike is clean. The jaws find purchase on her hindquarters, the rear section of her body, and for a moment she is inside the grip of the thing, inside the force that is the endpoint of millions of years of evolution toward exactly this purpose. She is not dead. This is already against the normal order of events. A clean grip from a large Nile crocodile on a 50-kilogram prey animal should be decisive. The death roll that crocodiles use to incapacitate and drown their prey, the violent rotation of the entire body around the axis of the bite that tears tissue and disorients the prey and uses the crocodile's mass as a weapon, should follow within seconds and the outcome should be settled. But in the chaos of the crossing, something is different. She is thrashing with a violence that is not merely panic. It is the absolute neurological maximum of an animal whose nervous system has thrown every available resource at survival. Her rear legs, the ones inside the grip, are useless to her, but her front legs are finding purchase on something, a sandbar, a submerged rock, some partial solidity in the chaos of the churned water, and she is pulling. She is pulling against the weight of a crocodile that has every physical advantage, pulling with the forelimbs and the chest and the neck and whatever muscular desperation evolution has kept in reserve for exactly this moment. The crocodile adjusts its grip. This is where the probability shifts, microscopically but meaningfully. The readjustment of the bite is the moment of fractional vulnerability, the half-second when the original position is released before the new one is secured, and in that half-second something happens that the crocodile's 200 million years of evolution did not fully account for. She is out. Not free, not safe, not recovered. She is out of the grip and she is in the water and she is injured and the crocodile is right there and the crossing is still happening around her, churned water and panicking bodies and the full catastrophe of the migration in full violence. But she is out, and her legs are moving, and she is swimming. She reaches the far bank. She climbs it on legs that are not working correctly, the hindquarters damaged, the gait wrong in the way that injured animals move when they are running on shock and adrenaline rather than structural integrity. Other animals move around her and past her. The herd does not wait for the injured. The herd is not built for that. She moves away from the water and into the grass on the far side and she is alive, which she should not be, and you need to hold that thought because we are only at the first miracle. To understand what happens next, we need to understand what injury means in this ecosystem and why our impala's story is not, after the crossing, moving toward safety. It is moving toward a different kind of danger that is in some ways more inevitable, because at least the crocodile required the accident of a crossing to get access to her. What is waiting on the dry land is always waiting, and it is very good at finding the animal that is moving wrong. The Masai Mara is not just a place where large animals cross rivers, it is one of the highest density predator ecosystems on Earth. The lion population of the Mara is among the most studied in the world, concentrated in a landscape where prey is abundant enough to support large prides and resident individuals at a density that visitors sometimes find disorienting. Because you can see lions here the way you see pigeons in a city, not because they are harmless, but because there are simply so many of them in a relatively accessible landscape. The cheetah population of the Mara is significant. The leopard population, more hidden but present, occupies the denser riverine vegetation. And the hyena population, the spotted hyena specifically, which is not the scavenger of popular imagination but one of the most effective pack hunters in Africa, is large and active and organized in ways that make it capable of detecting and pursuing injured prey over distances and durations that most other predators cannot match. An impala moving with a compromised hindquarter gait is not an invisible thing in this landscape. She is a signal. She is broadcasting her vulnerability on every frequency that predators monitor, the asymmetry of her movement, the slightly slower pace, the way she does not take the explosive leaping diversion that a healthy impala uses to confuse a pursuing cheetah or a lunging lion. She is, in the ecological sense of the word, marked. And she knows it. This is one of the things about prey animals that is easy to underestimate when you are watching from a vehicle and thinking in terms of the drama of the event rather than the experience of the animal. She does not know that she just survived a crocodile in the way that a human being would know it, with a retrospective narrative and a sense of fortunate escape and a story to tell. She has no retrospective narrative. What she has is the full neurological state of an animal that just survived maximum predator contact, which means she is in a state of physiological activation that is the opposite of calm, the cortisol and adrenaline flooding her system, the sensory processing running at maximum, every sound and movement in her peripheral vision parsing as potential threat, the whole nervous system screaming that she is in danger even now, even having escaped. Because the nervous system that is calibrated to this environment knows that escaping one thing does not mean the other things are gone. She moves through the grass on the far bank with the herd dispersing around her, and she is reading the landscape the way prey animals read landscapes, which is not the way we read landscapes. We look for things. She is looking for the absence of things, for the particular quality of stillness or sound or wind-carried information that tells her where the predators are not, because the negative space of predator absence is the only space she can safely occupy. The grass here is high enough to conceal a lying lion, and she knows this in the way she knows everything, not as a thought but as an elevated alertness that makes her head come up and her nostrils flare and her ears swivel and her weight shift onto her hindquarters ready for the explosive launch of escape every 30 seconds, every 20 seconds, every time the grass moves in a way that is slightly inconsistent with the wind. She is looking for the safest open ground. She is looking for the kind of visibility that gives her enough reaction time to use her speed. And she is doing all of this on damaged hindquarters that she has not yet had time to assess, in the immediate aftermath of maximum predator contact, surrounded by the ongoing chaos of a migration crossing that is still sending animals through the river behind her and dispersing them across the landscape ahead. The morning passes. She grazes or attempts to graze, the lowering of the head that exposes the neck being its own anxiety in a landscape of this density. She rests briefly, standing the way ungulates rest when they cannot afford to lie down and reduce their reaction time. The wound from the crocodile's grip is visible, a rawness on her flank that the flies have already found. It is not immediately debilitating, not severed muscle or broken bone, but it is real and it costs her something at every step, and it continues to broadcast the signal of her vulnerability to everything in the ecosystem with the sensory equipment to detect it. This is the context for what happens next, because the morning is only half over. The Mara River makes a bend, a long southward curve before turning again, and the migration pressure on this particular day is pushing animals to cross at multiple points along the river. Not just the primary crossing that our impala used but secondary crossings further downstream where the river is shallower in places, but no less inhabited by the animals that have made it their territory. The landscape between the first crossing point and these secondary crossings is traversed by the dispersing migration animals, and it is traversed by the predators that follow the migration for exactly this reason. The concentration of prey in a relatively small area around the river for the period of the crossing, which is the predator equivalent of a market day, everything in abundance, the hunting almost incidental. She is moving downstream. The herd she was part of has fragmented, as herds do after a crossing, some animals moving one way, some another, the collective coherence of the group dissolving into individual and small group decisions about grazing and water and the particular microterrain each animal is reading in real time. She is with a small group now, 4 or 5 impala, not a protective herd exactly but enough animals around her that the collective vigilance is greater than her own individual vigilance, and she can, briefly, lower her alert level by a fraction that matters to her physiology, enough to allow her heart rate to approach something closer to resting. Enough to allow the muscles that have been locked in preparation for explosive movement to release slightly and let her walk more naturally. The river is visible to her left. She is not thinking about the river. She has crossed the river. The river is behind her in the way that a danger you have survived is behind you, not forgotten but no longer the primary calculation. And then the small group she is moving with does something that happens 10,000 times a day in this ecosystem, and is each time a fresh negotiation between individual animals about risk and resource. They move toward the water, not to cross, to drink. The impala are grazers and browsers, but they also need water. And after the physical extremity of the crossing, after the blood loss from the wound, after the physiological burn of the adrenal response, the drive to drink is real and pressing. The river is there. The grass at the river's edge is greener than the grass further back, the way it always is near water, and they move toward it. She is with them. She should not be. Her experience of the last few hours should be, and in some functional senses, sounding alarms in her nervous system about this particular river on this particular day. But the drive to drink is competing with the alarm, and the small group around her represents a social gravity that is also real, the tendency of prey animals to stay with the group that keeps them, and the group is moving toward the water, and she is moving with the group. The second crossing point is not far. The dispersed migration animals have not all gone the same direction, and some of them are here, a smaller concentration than the main crossing, but enough animals near enough to the water to create the same basic conditions. The churned bank, the pressed grass, the noise and movement that in some ways increases caution and in some ways decreases it because the presence of many animals suggests no immediate predator, and the chaos of many bodies can make the subtle signals harder to read. She is at the water's edge. She lowers her head to drink. And the second crocodile hits her from below. This is the detail that makes this story, this specific story, not just extraordinary but almost categorically different from the usual near-miss account. Not a second predator of a different kind. Not a cheetah finding her weakened on the dry land, which would have been terrible but not astonishing. A second crocodile, in the same river, on the same day. The same architecture of attack. The water, the lunge, the jaws finding the body of an animal that has already survived this once, already carries the evidence of the first encounter in the rawness on her flank. The second crocodile is a different animal from the first. Different individual, different location, different moment. But the geometry is the same. The patient positioning beneath the surface, the explosive upward and forward movement that can cover the distance between the hidden animal and the bank in a fraction of a second, the jaws that are closing before the prey has fully processed the signal of danger. The ambush from water is one of the most refined killing techniques in the natural world, and its effectiveness depends precisely on the time gap between the moment the prey animal registers the threat and the moment the jaws close, because if that gap is small enough, detection is irrelevant. By the time you know the crocodile is there, the crocodile is on you. She is on you, again. The jaws close this time on the front foreleg, the left foreleg, and this is different from the first encounter. The hindquarter grip of the morning was painful and damaging, but her forelimbs were free. Now the limb that is in the grip is a forelimb, and forelimbs in an impala are part of the primary flight mechanism in a way that is different from the rear legs. The rear legs provide the explosive power of the initial launch, the burst speed. The front legs are the landing gear and the direction control, the things that let her turn and extend and navigate the terrain at speed. Losing the use of one forelimb, even temporarily, changes her survival mathematics in ways that extend beyond this moment. The crocodile is pulling her toward the water. This is the fundamental physics of the situation. The crocodile's power is greatest in the water, and its immediate objective after securing a grip is to move the prey into the medium where the crocodile is dominant and the prey is not. The water is a meter away. Less, she is being pulled across that meter. What happens in the next seconds is something that the people who witnessed it, who have watched many crossings and seen many kills, describe as unlike anything they had seen before, not because it was clean or fast or technically remarkable, but because of the sheer duration and quality of the resistance. She is pulling back. Both rear legs are on the bank and they are driving with everything she has, the hindquarters that were damaged in the first encounter now being asked to provide the anchor against which she can resist the pull of a 500-kilogram predator that is moving backward into its element. The physics should not favor her. The physics of mass and grip and medium should settle this quickly and decisively in one direction. But the bank here is not soft. There is something solid beneath the grass, a shelf of compressed clay or rock, and her hooves are finding it. And the angle of the pull is not directly into the deep water but across a shallowing that gives her something to push against. And the other animals near her, the small group of impala she came to the water with, are scattering in every direction in an explosion of movement and noise that is itself a kind of interference, not help in any purposeful sense, no solidarity in the way mammals sometimes display solidarity, but sheer kinetic chaos that changes the immediate environment in which this struggle is happening. The crocodile makes its own adjustment. The death roll begins, the full body rotation that is designed to use mass and torque to overcome resistance, and for a moment she goes with it, the rotation lifting the foreleg that is gripped and beginning to take the rest of her body with it. She is going into the water, she is going in. And then something releases. The exact mechanism is not fully clear even to the people who watched it and reviewed the footage. A slip in the grip, a particular quality of resistance in her foreleg at the moment of maximum rotational force that caused the crocodile's bite to slide rather than hold. A fortunate angle. The combination of her drive backward with the mechanical reality of a rolling animal whose grip is on a limb rather than a body mass. Something gives. Something in the interaction between the crocodile's position and her position and the bank and the water and the specific moment of the roll produces an outcome that the statistics of this encounter do not predict. She is on the bank, she is free. The forelimb is damaged, it is very clearly damaged, but it is attached to her body. She is breathing. She is alive, standing on 3.5 working limbs on the bank of the Mara River, in the same river that tried to kill her 6 hours ago with a different crocodile, standing there for a moment in the way that animals sometimes stand immediately after the end of something, the body not yet having caught up to the fact of survival. And then she runs. She runs badly, the forelimb not bearing full weight, the gait asymmetrical in the way that she cannot afford but cannot help, the speed she reaches lower than the speed she needs to be safe. She runs away from the water and into the grass, and the other animals scatter ahead of her, and she runs until the river is behind her, and then further, until the river is not visible and the smell of water is diluted by the smell of grass and dust and the 1,000 other signals of the dry land. And she is still running, still alive, still the most improbable thing in the Mara on this particular morning. Now we need to stop here because this is the moment in the story where the dramatic facts are clear and the temptation is to leave it there, to end with the image of the impala running away into the grass, battered and improbable and alive. But I think that is the less interesting ending because the more interesting question, the one that the two crocodile encounters actually open rather than close, is why. Why did she survive when the physics and the probability and the 200 million years of crocodile evolution said she should not have? And the answer to that question turns out to be less about luck than most people initially assume, and more about something that the word luck does not really capture. Let's start with the crocodile. Because understanding why the impala escaped requires understanding what the crocodile is actually doing and what can go wrong with it. The Nile crocodile's hunting strategy at river crossings is extraordinarily effective on average, but is not infallible on any individual attempt, and the reasons it can fail are instructive. The strike from ambush depends on precise positioning, and precise positioning in a churned, crowded crossing where the water is full of panicking bodies and the bank is shifting, and the noise and vibration of hundreds of hooves is disrupting the acoustic and vibrational information the crocodile uses to track its target, is harder than it is in the idealized conditions of an isolated drinking animal at a quiet bank. The first crocodile's initial grip on the hindquarters rather than on the body mass or the neck was not optimal. An optimal grip is harder to guarantee in chaos. The death roll, which is the crocodile's mechanism for converting a grip into a kill, works most efficiently when the grip is on a body mass that rotates with the crocodile. A limb is a different mechanical proposition. A limb is attached to the body by a joint, and joints can transmit force, but they can also allow rotation that is independent of the main body mass, which changes the dynamics of the roll in ways that can work against the crocodile's intention. It is not that the death roll does not work on a limb. It does, and it will tear the limb from the body given sufficient torque and hold. But the mechanical dynamics are different and the margin for slippage is larger. The crocodile in both encounters was also, in both cases, not at the absolute peak of the conditions it needed. Large crocodiles at migration crossings are typically better positioned and more precisely placed when they have had time to settle and wait in known ambush locations. A crossing that is already underway, with multiple animals in the water, with water that has been churned by hundreds of bodies, with prey animals that are not coming to the water quietly to drink but are already in panic mode from the crossing itself, is noisier and more chaotic for the crocodile's sensory systems than an ideal ambush. Not impossible, clearly, since they kill many animals at crossings, but meaningfully more complicated than the ideal. And then there is the impala herself, because she is not simply a passive victim in this analysis, and the quality of her resistance in both encounters is not explained entirely by chance. The muscular power she brought to both escapes, the drive against the grip, the refusal to stop resisting that extended the encounters to the point where the mechanical vulnerabilities of the crocodile's position could become factors. This is not something that every animal produces in every encounter. There is a population of animals that, in the first moment of the grip, effectively stop resisting in a neurological shutdown that is sometimes called tonic immobility, or that reflects a system so overwhelmed by the intensity of the threat that coordinated resistance fails. And there is a population that fights with everything that is left, that recruits every remaining neuromuscular resource to the single purpose of not being taken, and that sustains that recruitment for longer than the system would normally maintain it. She was in the second population, not because she decided to be. Decisions are not what this is about, but because her particular nervous system, her particular combination of conditioning and physiological state, and the precise mechanics of the grip she was in and the terrain she was on, produced a sustained resistance that was, in both encounters, just sufficient to push the encounter past the point where the crocodile's hold could be maintained. This is what survival actually looks like in an ecosystem like this. It is not heroic in the narrative sense. It is not graceful. There is nothing clean about an impala with a torn hindquarter and a damaged forelimb thrashing at the edge of a river in a chaos of mud and blood and noise. It is not a story that wants to be watched. But it is the truest possible account of what the margin of survival is, which is the margin between maximum resistance and the mechanical limits of the predator's technique. And that margin is narrow, desperately narrow, narrow in ways that most animals never discover because most animals never get to the second side of it. She discovered it twice, in one day. The afternoon that follows is its own story, quieter than the morning but not simple. She is now an animal with 2 wounds in an ecosystem that contains the full roster of African predators, and the afternoon is the hunting time for several of them. Lions in the Mara are active at various points through the day, more so near dawn and dusk but not exclusively. The hyena clans are particularly active in the late afternoon as the heat begins to break, and the light changes and the prey animals that were motionless through the hottest hours begin to move again. The leopards along the river vegetation are awakening, emerging from the dense cover where they spent the day, moving into their territories with the particular fluid efficiency of the most complete hunter in Africa. She knows none of this explicitly. She knows it the way she has always known it, as a constant background radiation of threat assessment that shapes every movement and every rest and every decision about where to stand and which way to face. But she is diminished now in ways that matter to this assessment. The front leg is bearing weight but not fully. The hindquarter wound from the morning is stiffening in the way that muscle injuries stiffen as the inflammation begins, the initial adrenaline-masked shock of the damage giving way to the actual physiological reality of damaged tissue. She is slower than she was this morning. Not dramatically, not in the way that a healthy observer would necessarily notice from a distance, but measurably in the milliseconds of delayed initial response and the slightly reduced top speed, and the imprecision in direction change that means she cannot take the sharp corners that are part of her standard evasion repertoire. She is also, against the odds, still with a group. A small group of impala has reformed around her, or she has drifted into proximity with another small group, and this matters more than any individual assessment of her own condition. Herd animals survive not just through individual fitness but through collective vigilance. And a group of 5 impala has 5 times the sensory input of a single animal, 5 pairs of eyes reading the grass and the sky and the tree lines, 5 pairs of ears turning independently toward every sound, 5 noses processing the wind. The collective alarm system of a prey animal group is more sensitive and more reliable than any individual's alarm system. And being inside it costs her very little because group membership does not require her to do anything beyond moving with the group and being available to the collective. The afternoon passes. The heat is extreme, the dry season afternoon heat of the Mara that shimmers off the grass and makes the tree lines dance at the edges of vision in ways that generate false alarms and real ones in approximately equal measure. She stays with her group. She grazes briefly in the way that injured animals graze, the head down for shorter periods, the vigilance intervals more frequent, the balance between nutritional input and exposure risk shifting toward exposure management at the cost of nutrition. She is not eating enough. She knows this in the way that hunger is a signal, not a thought, but she is alive, and alive with inadequate nutrition is a better situation than the alternative. The light changes in the late afternoon the way it always changes in East Africa, the quality of the gold shifting from the direct heat of midday toward the horizontal warmth of the approaching evening, the shadows lengthening across the grass, the temperature beginning its slow descent toward the cold that will arrive with surprising force after dark. The predators feel this change. Their activity increases. The hyena clan to the north of the crossing area begins its evening territorial circuits, the whooping calls that carry across the plain as both communication and claim. A cheetah is visible on an open stretch of grass several hundred meters away, sitting upright in the way that cheetahs sit when they are scanning for prey, the extraordinary forward-pointing eyes doing what those eyes evolved to do, resolving detail at distance in ways that make the naked human eye seem comparative crude. She sees the cheetah. The group sees the cheetah. They move, not in panic, not in the explosive flight that a pursuing cheetah would trigger, but in the purposeful drift of prey animals increasing the buffer between themselves and a potential threat. The casual repositioning that does not cost energy the way flight costs energy but maintains the safety margin that matters. The cheetah does not follow. It is reading its own calculations, assessing the group's alertness, the terrain between them, its own energy reserves, the probability of a successful hunt against these particular animals at this particular moment. The calculation does not favor pursuit. The cheetah looks elsewhere. The evening comes and she has survived it. The night is something else. Night in the Mara is the lion's domain in a way that the day is not, because lions are one of the few large predators that function as effectively at night as in daylight. Their eyes adapted for low light in ways that give them a significant advantage over prey animals whose visual acuity drops sharply after dark. The sounds of the night, the hyena calls that are now closer, the distant roar of lions on territory boundaries, the strange coughing bark of a leopard in the riverine vegetation. These are a different kind of threat landscape than the day's visible dangers, and an injured animal in the Mara at night is in more danger than an injured animal in the day, because the visual advantage that her speed would normally give her is reduced when neither she nor the predator can see at full daytime resolution. She has survived the day. The night is a new question. And here is the thing about that night, the thing that is easy to overlook in the drama of the river crossings. We do not know with certainty what happened through those dark hours. We know she was seen in the morning. We know she survived the 2 crocodile encounters that are the documented, witnessed, recorded fact at the center of this story. What we do not know, because the night in the Mara is not illuminated and the camera cannot follow, and the millions of things that happen in the dark hours of an African game reserve are witnessed only by the animals involved, is how she spent the night and what she encountered, and what compromises and close calls and moments of alarm and relief composed those dark hours. This uncertainty is itself important, because it points to something about survival that the dramatic events of the river tend to obscure. The crossing was dramatic. The crocodile encounters were dramatic. They were the kind of events that, when witnessed and filmed and described, generate the immediate recognition of consequence. But survival in this ecosystem is not primarily composed of dramatic events. It is primarily composed of the 10,000 quiet decisions and movements and assessments and responses that happen between the dramatic events, the relentless minute-by-minute management of risk that is the actual texture of life for a prey animal in a predator-dense ecosystem. The moments we see and talk about are the moments that survive into account. The rest of it, the vast majority of it, the ordinary extraordinary business of staying alive in the Mara on a day when the calendar says nothing special is happening, this is the background against which the dramatic events are figures. And the impala is moving through that background all the time, even when nobody is watching, perhaps especially when nobody is watching. She was seen the following day. That is the baseline fact of the story's continuation. She was seen with the wounds visible, moving with her group alive. The hindquarter wound was visible but not apparently debilitating her movement at the fundamental level. The foreleg was being used imperfectly but functionally. She was grazing. She was drinking at a different point on the river in a different group with the wariness that an animal carries after the specific fear has been encoded into the nervous system by the full force of survival level experience. She was alive. Whether she is alive now, today, as this account is being written, is not knowable. The Mara does not offer lifetime guarantees. The predators are always there. The river is always there. The crocodiles in the river are always there and always patient. She's an impala in the heart of an ecosystem that does not sentimentalize individual lives, that balances its ledger in numbers and seasons and generations, rather than in the particular continuity of any one animal's heartbeat. She may have survived the following week and the month after that and the dry season and the next wet season and grown her wounds into scars and run at full speed again on healed legs. Or she may have encountered on any of the subsequent days the predator that the two crocodiles could not be. Both outcomes are consistent with the Mara. Both are in the deepest sense ordinary. What is not ordinary is what she already did, which is the thing we came to talk about, the thing that required this accounting. She looked into the jaws of the thing twice and came back out twice, and in a world organized around the efficient transfer of energy from prey to predator, that is not ordinary. That is not something the statistics predict or the biology requires. That is a residue of the particular, a trace of the individual within the general,